Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Best Practices to Protect Your Business. We appreciate you taking the time of your busy schedule to join us today. My name is William DeMar. I'm the Director of Information Security, supporting all accesso divisions globally. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items so you know what to expect and how to participate in today's session. You may have already noticed that your voices have been muted. They will remain muted throughout the session. However, you will be able to type your questions to our moderator throughout the webinar. Then at the end of the session, there will be a Q&A taken from your typed questions. Okay, let's get started. At accesso, we believe that technology has the power to redefine the guest experience. Everything we do starts with thinking about the guest experience first, and that allows us to help simplify operations, improve guest satisfaction, and drive growth for our clients. As you can see, from theme parks to performing arts, zoos, festivals, and more, our products and services support some of the top attractions in the world. Whether it be food and beverage point of sale, virtual line reservations, ticketing, or guest management, our solutions help streamline and simplify your operations across a wide variety of venues. When it comes to solutions, we provide the technology. This lets our clients focus on what they do best, provide outstanding experience for guests. We think about these solutions in 4 different sets. First is accesso Low Queue, which provides virtual queuing solutions to the attractions around the globe. You can see our QBand, QSmart, and QBot offerings, as well as the newest member of the family, the accesso Prism Band. The second category is ticketing. This includes our accesso Showware solution, which is a fully hosted box office and online ticketing solution, our robust accesso Seriousware point of sale solution, and our award-winning accesso Passport e-commerce platform. Our third category is distribution. In 2017, we acquired a company called Ingresso, which is essentially a global distribution system for venues. In other words, this allows clients to reach prospective customers through more avenues than ever before. And finally, our newest product, the Experience Engine, or TE2, which helps marketers utilize guest data to deliver more personalized and targeted interactions. Together, these all form the accesso ecosystem, complementing one another and going far beyond what any of these single units could ever achieve independently. Accesso has a huge focus on research and development, which continues to set us apart. Last year, accesso was able to invest over $20 million directly back into R&D across all our platforms, an amount I'm told is equivalent to some of our competitors' entire annual revenues. But the reason we invest so heavily in our products is because our industry demands it, our clients benefit from it, and we know it makes a positive difference in the guest experience. We see all of our clients as partners, and as with any partnership, it's important to make sure we are sharing information. Today, we want to provide some insight into security. We'll take a look at some companies and organizations who have had the misfortune of suffering a security breach over the last year. We'll discuss some activities that often lead to a security breach and provide some basic steps we can all take to reduce the likelihood of ourselves or our companies from becoming victims. Let's first start out by clearly defining a data breach. If you were to do some research, you would see that there are tons of definitions on how one defines a data breach. I've tried to capture what I believe is the most straightforward version of the definition. However, the reality is that the federal government agencies, along with individual states in the US, have their own definition of what a data breach is. And in the case of countries outside of the US, their definitions vary greatly as well. The common point and reasoning behind defining a data breach is to ensure that companies and individuals are aware of their legal obligations to protect personal information, and when that information is not adequately protected, to have the right to notify or be notified of any breach of that personal information. So why does this matter? Well, there were over 6,500 reported incidents that resulted in over 5 billion records being breached in 2018. It may be hard to believe, but that's actually a tremendous decrease by nearly 3 billion records from 2017, where some 7.9 billion records were reportedly breached. As we look into some of the organizations that suffered a breach in 2018, there were a dozen or so breaches and where 100 million or more sensitive records were exposed. We refer to these as mega breaches. And together, those breaches accounted for 74% of all records exposed in 2018. Looking at the slide, we can see the largest breach by far in 2018 was one that involved the people of India's national ID database, known as Aadhaar. This database is maintained by the Unique Identification Authority of India, and they are the government agency that is mandated to assign a unique 12-digit number to each individual in India. In the US, this will be equivalent to our Social Security Administration. The incident was reported in March 2018 and exposed the national ID numbers, or Social Security numbers as we refer to them in the US, as well as home addresses, phone numbers, email addresses, postal codes, and photographs for over 1.1 billion Indian citizens. You also see some popular brands here, such as Google, Amazon, and Facebook. There are some other notable names that suffered a security breach in 2018 that are not seen on my pretty eye chart. Those are Dunkin' Donuts, the US Postal Service, we had Nordstrom, Toyota, T-Mobile, Instagram, Macy's, Chili's, Panera's Bread, FedEx, just to name a few. One of the most interesting names on the list is LifeLock. Yes, LifeLock, the same company that is a popular choice to be contracted to provide identity and fraud monitoring services for the customers affected by a company that has been breached. Our industry is not immune to this either, as we saw one of the competitors in our space, Ticketfly, also suffered a security breach last year in which 27 million customer records were hacked and their websites were down for more than 4 days, which disrupted their services and impacted their clients and their guests. So why do we continue year after year to see these breaches happen? In an effort to help answer that question, there are several organizations every year that perform breach studies, such as Verizon, which publishes the Verizon Breach Report, the Ponemon Institute, who publishes the Cost of a Data Breach Study, as well as CompTIA's Cybersecurity Study, among several others. In one study, we see that 62% of breaches featured some type of hacking, and 81% of those leveraged stolen or weak passwords, which by far is the most common tactic being used. In the other study, we see that security breaches are categorized as those related to either human errors or technology errors. When you consider in the percentages where you see technology errors, those also include the category of misconfigured and unpatched systems. So when combined, it's realized that over 95% of successful security attacks are the result of some type of human error. I want to note also that hacking was one of the most common breach types and led to the exposure of some 1.7 billion records. In comparison, human error led to the exposure of nearly 2.6 billion records. That's nearly 1 billion more records than hacking, which is part of the conversation we will focus on today. What basic security practices can we put in place to protect ourselves and our companies and make sure we as individuals are not contributing to this statistic? Human error typically involves circumstances in which certain actions, decisions, or behaviors threaten business security. Most organizations are unaware that the greatest security threat could be internal and not necessarily intentional, but just through the use of bad practices, lack of fundamental security awareness, with criminal cyber activity on the rise, not enough businesses are paying attention to the avoidable consequences of human error. Unfortunately, people and companies still take the stance or believe that this could never happen to them. They often assume that since it has never happened here before, it won't happen, or just because it happened to them doesn't necessarily mean it will happen to us. The reality is that you could have the best technology, processes, and procedures in place, but one unforeseen slip up by an employee could be disastrous for your company. When we look at misconfigured systems, 70% of data loss happen because of a misconfigured cloud storage server, database, or network. The cyber criminals are aware of the lack of attention by sysadmins and existence of such misconfigured cloud servers, and they will continue to target companies as long as individuals continue to do nothing about it or continue to lack secure best practices. Looking at weak passwords, although passwords may seem like the most basic security technique or control, because people continue to use simple weak passwords, they can easily be cracked or obtained by the bad guys when not handled properly. Many employees work with sensitive data on a daily basis. Carelessness can be one of the main causes of data being leaked or compromised, and sometimes data leakage can happen because employees are just generally too nice. There are way too many breach examples of someone calling or asking individuals. Sometimes they're just being nice. They're over conversational. The conversation's so general, so before you know it, you're sharing information about yourself or someone else without even knowing you did so. When we talk about incident response, just take a moment to reflect on this question. If an attack occurred at your company right now, do you know what to do or even who to contact first? Is there some document or process that you have access to that has information on the steps you need to take if you suspect a security incident has occurred? In most cases, the answer is no. Do you have company data on your laptop or mobile device, such as files you copied locally to your computer or work email on your mobile phone? Is that information encrypted? Or in other words, protected in some way that if you lose your device or if the device was to be stolen, someone couldn't just pick it up and read all of the email or documents or other information you have on that device. Just think about some of the end-of-month reports that are done on a regular basis by different staff in your company that may include either financial or customer information. Those reports could contain employee, company, or even guest data in spreadsheets that end up on those laptops or mobile devices, which if not encrypted, leads to a breach of that data. Here are some specific human error actions that have led to some large data breaches. These actions allow malware and phishing attacks to be successful, which accounted for 337 combined incidents last year. Let's take another minute to reflect here. How many of you can relate to these actions? How many of you share passwords with your coworkers? Many times this is a common practice at your companies in order to log into a shared machine. Do you have your own account to log into that machine that's shared with your coworkers? If not, you should. How many of you log into insecure networks? Those are those wireless networks at coffee shops and hotels that don't require a password or gives everyone the same password to log in. Remember, on an insecure networks, the bad guys have the ability to sniff all your traffic and view anything you type into insecure web browsers. What about opening personal emails at work? Most companies have protection for company email, but not your personal email, which could lead to some type of compromise if your personal email contains malware. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the term, malware is the general term covering all of the different types of threats to your computer safety, such as viruses, spyware, worms, trojans, rootkits, and so on. There were also several breaches last year where people that deal with large amounts of customer information sent that information to the wrong people. Just an accident, right? By legal standards, that constitutes a breach. As part of doing business, we all have a duty to ensure we provide adequate protection for our fellow employees, our clients, and our guests' personal information. Furthermore, they expect it. Don't you, whenever you provide information to a place or website you visit and provide your personal information to? For smaller companies, a significant data breach could bankrupt that organization. In fact, 60% of small companies go out of business within 6 months of suffering a cyber attack that resulted in a breach of customer data. So what can we do? I'm sure you've heard this before, but I'm going to say it again anyway. Create unique, strong passwords that use a combination of words, numbers, symbols, and both upper and lowercase letters. We have to stop using weak passwords. We make it way too easy for the bad guys. Don't use easily guessed passwords such as password, password123, user, user123, or personal information such as spouse, children, or pet names. There are literally people with nothing else better to do than scour social media sites looking for information they can use to guess your passwords on the different sites you visit. Don't share your password with anyone. Don't use the same password that you use on your social media or other sites. In particular, make sure you're using different passwords to log in to any sites that contain sensitive personal or payment information. So your next question for me should be, well, how do I remember multiple long, strong, and different passwords for all the different sites I visit? The answer to that is to use a password vault. Password vaults allow you to store multiple passwords securely, meaning they are encrypted. Encryption is used to protect data so that if a bad guy were to try to access that data and didn't have the proper keys to unlock or decrypt the data, it's scrambled and cannot be viewed. Some password vaults allow you to sync across multiple devices, such as your desktop at home, your laptop, and even your mobile devices, with you only having to remember one long, strong password to access the vault itself. They even sync with your internet browsers, so when you visit a site, the vault is aware and automatically provides the username and password to log into the site. Again, as long as you have initially provided the password to access that vault. A couple of good examples, and they're free, are a product called LastPass. Another product is called Dashlane. I personally prefer LastPass. Also, you should use two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication whenever accessing sensitive information such as banking sites or sites that store payment information. Multi-factor authentication means you're not just using a password, but also another factor, such as something you have, which could be a card or a token, something you know, such as a PIN or code, or something you are, using biometric data such as finger or thumbprint, or even facial recognition now with our current technology. A good example of traditional two-factor technology is the use of your debit or ATM card. You have the card, which is something physical you have, and you need to provide a PIN, which is something you know. In the context of passwords, we want to make sure we are using another factor in addition to just your password to access sensitive data. Alternatively, you can use what's called two-step authentication. A lot of financial institutions are using this now, where you log into their site using a password, at which point they ask you to provide a phone number or email address to send you a code, which you need to provide in addition to your password to access the data. A couple of free solutions that can be used for multi-factor or two-step authentication are Google Authenticator or a solution called Duo, both which you can download for free and install on your mobile phone, desktop, or laptop. As mentioned before, many of us come into contact with sensitive customer or employee data every day. If your company doesn't already have a clean desk policy, make this a practice yourself. Ensure your desk is clean of sensitive data, and if your job requires you to handle or store physical copies or artifacts of sensitive data, make sure it's locked up. Shred sensitive data even at home. The bad guys do actually dig through your trash looking for bank statements or other documents, and now they know what website to go on to use the username and password they stole while you were logged into that insecure wireless connection at the coffee shop around the corner. Encrypted. Encryption, again, is a means of scrambling data so that only those that have the proper keys are able to decrypt and view that data. If you take your laptop from the office, always make sure it's locked up. Theft of a laptop from a car that has sensitive information is considered a breach. There are solutions such as BitLocker for Windows and FileVault for Mac. These are what's called full disk encryption solutions and are available for free. And in many cases, you just need to turn these features on. Just a note, like I said before, they use what's called full disk encryption solutions, meaning they encrypt your entire storage device. There are also solutions that let you encrypt just files individually. Here's an exercise I'd like you to do later today or this week. Go to your email and do a search for, I want you to do two searches. Do one search for credit report and do another search for taxes. If you're using a free email service like Gmail, Outlook.com, Yahoo, or the like, they have increased the amount of email data that you can store, and you may be amazed at how many credit card reports and tax returns you've collected over the years and have in your personal email. And if you're not using two-factor authentication or regularly changing your email password, getting access to your personal email is now trivial for the bad guys. So remove that data out of your email and store it securely using one of the techniques previously mentioned to encrypt that data. Don't get me wrong, free Wi-Fi at coffee shops, hotels, etc. are okay. Just be cautious, especially if you're making purchases on or logging into your bank account on them. Use a more secure network for that. The bad guys are notorious for setting up nearby free Wi-Fi hotspots to either snoop on your wireless connection or redirect your computer to a fake lookalike hotspot to capture your logon credentials. If you travel a lot and your company doesn't offer a VPN solution or virtual private network solution, which is a way to ensure your connection is secure, even when using free wireless, there are some good free ones to use. Phishing is a fraudulent attempt to obtain sensitive information via email, such as username, passwords, and credit card details by disguising as someone trustworthy. It's also used to install malware, as we discussed earlier. When it comes to phishing, never click on hyperlinks sent in email. Go to the websites directly if it looks suspicious. If you receive a strange email from someone you know that you were not expecting, or if they're asking you to click something or provide some information that seems odd, call them to ensure it's truly them sending you an email. If it's a strange email from someone you don't know, just delete it. If it's truly that important, believe me, they will find a way to get a hold of you. And as always, if something doesn't look right or something looks suspicious, make sure that you contact someone. We cover quite a bit of information in a relatively short period of time. The reality is the bad guys are working together every day. They share their tips, tricks, and techniques on the dark web, which, if you haven't heard of the term before, is a part of the network that cannot be found by traditional search engines like Google, Internet Explorer, Chrome, etc. They pass along logons and passwords and mass amounts of personal data they have collected and stolen from unsuspected victims, and are counting on one of us to make a mistake, like any one of the many examples we discussed here today. In order to break into our systems, steal data, commit fraud, or use the information for some other malicious intent. So it's up to us to be good partners, be proactive, and share techniques and some basic security practices that will help protect ourselves and the many guests we serve every day. So there were a few technologies during the presentation that I want to make sure that you jot down. Free is always good, but these are some pretty good free resources from reputable companies. Both the Ponemon Institute and Verizon are some of the longest running organizations that have been contributing to breach research studies for the past 10 years. You can just do a Google search for these and find this information online. Remember, Password vaults allow you to store all of your passwords in one location, and they are all encrypted. VPN software, or virtual private network software, allows you to protect your communication channel if you're using free internet services somewhere like coffee shops or hotels. Multi-factor authentication solutions are used in addition to just passwords. In many cases, you would use a password in addition to a code that can be accessed via a mobile device such as a mobile phone, which you can set up to be your second factor. Just remember, many of the websites you log into now offer two-factor or multi-factor authentication. So if you download Google or Duo, for example, you can configure those websites you log into to use your mobile device, and Google and Duo generates a passcode for you to use as a second factor. Finally, we discussed encryption, both full disk encryption, which if you have a Windows or Mac device, it comes installed with one of those solutions provided. Again, you just simply need to turn that feature on. And file level encryption to encrypt specific files like the credit card reports and tax returns most of you will find in your email when you perform your searches later on this week. Windows also has a built-in feature called EFS that can be used without the need to install any additional software. Again, encryption at the file or folder level is done so that if someone gains unauthorized access to your device, any files you have encrypted will be scrambled and not viewable unless a key code or password is used to decrypt that file. At this time, I'd like to open up the floor to any questions. As a reminder, you can type your questions into the question pane on the GoToWebinar panel. Lynette, do we have any questions that have been submitted?
Thank you, Will. We actually do have a few questions. The first question is, there was a lot of discussion around passwords and making sure that we protect our passwords. Is there any way for us to know if our current password is safe?
Sure. There are a couple ways. One is a recommendation, one is not. One of the things you can do, you can go online and do a Google search, and there are several sites that will allow you to put your password in to tell you whether or not your password is strong. I personally do not recommend doing that. I really don't trust any website that's asking to put in a password. Alternatively, for a lot of sites, we use our email address to log into them. There is a site called Have I Been Pawned? Again, you can just do a search in whatever your browser of choice to find a website, Have I Been Pawned? And that organization, what that organization does is they compile several of the breaches that have occurred across the industry, and they maintain a database. So if your email address was compromised in any one of the breaches, you can just type in your email address and it will associate your email and whether or not it was a part of any of the breaches that have been compiled over the last several years, and it will tell you whether or not your password was compromised or any other personal information was compromised as part of that breach. So obviously, if you go to that site and you find that your password has been breached, I would recommend changing that password. Not only on your email, but anywhere else that you're using that email and password to log into on any of those sites that you're using.
Perfect, thank you for that. Our next question is, you recommended using free software, but is using free software safe?
Yeah, so good question. From the recommendations that I provided, most of those companies also provide a commercial version of that software. So most of your top Fortune 100, 500, Fortune 1000 companies are using that same software. The reason that they have a free version is really just for the community and for personal use. So it's able to be used for very small individual accounts or very small amount of systems, but those software, the free software is actually safe. One of the things I do recommend, anytime you're downloading free software, even from any of the sites that I mentioned, please make sure that you go directly to that site And when you're doing your search for that software, only download software from that site. Don't just go out and randomly go do searches for free software to download, because a lot of times the software you're downloading, if you're not going directly to the site, or the site that's hosting that software, it's probably some type of malicious software. So, but ultimately, free software and any of the ones that I mentioned today are safe to use.
Great, thank you. Our next question is, you mentioned website security. Are Accesso's websites secure?
Yeah, another good question. Yes, our sites are definitely secure. One of the things you can do whenever you're looking at those websites is go in and look for either HTTPS or look for a lock up in the corner. Anytime you see the words HTTPS for your before your website or a lock, that means that site requires encryption, which means from your client session to that website, that information is encrypted, so that if someone was to sniff on that, sniff the line or sniff on that network, that information would be scrambled and secure. For any one of our product lines, whether it's in the Ingresso, TE2, Showware, Searsware, Passport, LoQ, any one of the sites that collect sensitive information, usernames, passwords, or any of them that you put your credit card in, those sites are secure, are protected, and we have multiple layers of security on those sites.
Perfect. Thank you for answering that. I think we have time for one last question. Does accesso provide assistance with PCI compliance? PCI standards are obviously there to prevent data breaches.
Yeah, so we are PCI compliant. So our products are PCI compliant, and we do PCI security assessments. As part of most of our engagements with our clients, we provide attestation of compliance for those. We also have our applications are also PA-DSS certified. So if you take Passport, for example, it's a PA-DSS certified application. So that application is certified, and we do help with our partners to make sure that any interactions with our systems are PCI compliant. And if you need any help or assistance with that, just contact your customer support representatives, and we'll make sure that we get you any help you need.
Great, thank you, Will, for answering those questions. And thank you to everyone for attending today's webinar, Best Practices to Protect Your Business. During today's webinar, we covered a lot of topics, but we hope you came away with some useful information on how you as an individual in your respective roles at your company can implement changes so that what you're currently doing, to implement changes so what you're currently doing in order to ensure that we as a collective group are doing all that we can to protect both our companies and our guests. So I encourage you to reach out to your client services manager or sales director if you have any questions or want to learn more about accesso. At the end of the day, we are your partner, so we only succeed when you succeed. We'll go ahead and send out the link to the recording within the next day or so. But on behalf of accesso, Will, and myself, thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day.